This article mostly talks about digital infrastructure investment and to strengthen the strategic partnerships which can contribute to a more prosperous and secure world. This article explains why North Bihar sees floods every year. So, North Bihar is flooded every monsoon, and crops and the livestock are destroyed, and people are driven from their homes. So, what makes this area so prone to flooding each year? The reason is extremely heavy rainfall and floods in Nepal, which releases 6.6 lakh cusick from the Birpur barrage on the Kosi River there, and the largest volumes in almost 6 decades. So, talking about the geography of the region, so snow and rain-fed rivers they crisscross Bihar, and the state's government flood management improvement support center describes India's most flood-prone region with about 76% of North Bihar's population living under the recurring threat of flood devastation. And it has identified four kinds of floods. So the first one is flash floods, which occurs due to rainfall in Nepal, and it's a short lead time of 8 hours, and the water recedes quickly. The second being river floods, so they have a lead time of about 24 hours, and it could take more than a week for the water to recede. The third being drainage congestion in the river confluence, which has a lead time of more than 24 hours, and the flood it could last throughout the monsoons. Then there are some permanent waterlogged areas. So talking about the first three types of flood, flash floods, river floods, and drainage congestion. So they're mainly due to Bihar's location immediately to the south of Nepal, from where the Himalayan rivers they carry massive volumes of loose soil and sediment downstream. Then the fourth category, the permanent waterlogging, that is the result of factors which is spilling of silted small rivers, encroachment of drainage channels, embankment induced waterlogging, and presence of soil type depression, which are called chores. Then talking about the Kosi embankment, so the most destructive the state's river is the Kosi, the sorrow of Bihar. And in 1950, the embankments were built along the river in an attempt to contain it. And the height was raised in 1987 and 2008. So the problem is non-engineering solution. So dam on the coast, it was proposed decades ago, but the absence of an agreement with Nepal, the plan has not progressed yet. And there are two ways to deal with floods. First is the structural solution, such as dams, embankments. And the second is non-structural solutions, which include laws, policies, risk reduction, and mitigation. So, since we cannot change the geography of Bihar, there is great need to work on aspects such as adequate warning, quick reaction times, awareness, and training in dealing with floods, etc.
And also there is a flood atlas as well. So flood atlas again, there we can say the important role of ISRO as well in terms of the role being played or the functionality of the Earth observation satellites in monitoring the changing water levels. So flood atlas is minimizing the risk, that is we can say mitigation, and damage from the floods may be a more rational way of flood management than formulating structural measures along the dynamic rivers such as Kosi, which is again Sorrow VR. So apart from these solutions, what we can focus upon is river management and dredging. Here we can particularly focus on silt management so that the rivers which are carrying large amount of sediments from Himalayas, so it raises the riverbeds and reduce water carrying capacity. So maintaining that e-flow of the rivers, that is one of the solutions. Apart from this, building reservoirs and dams, I will talked about the upstream storage dams are important, and here the agreement with Nepal is very important. So in this case, like for example, rivers like Kosi Gandak, they originate in Nepal. So international cooperation will play important role. Agreement on dams construction, location of it, water storage, and flood control. So that needs to be prioritized. So we have already have the India Nepal Joint River Commission to address these issues. Then we can also talk about afforestation and catchment area management, where we can promote more of vegetation. So this will reduce the soil erosion and again the silt load which is carried by the rivers. And second can be within this watershed management programs in the upstream areas to slow the flow of water and enhance groundwater recharge at the same time. And apart from this, flood forecasting and early warning systems. So here the role of Central Water Commission in terms of sharing more localized and accurate data sharing mechanisms between India and Nepal, it can play important role. So rainfall prediction, satellite-based monitoring, real-time river data, again hyper localized manner can help us at better effectiveness and taking early like preventive measures, and we can be better prepared.
How cyclones lead to long-term increase in human mortality. So this talks about United States southern coast, which was rocked by Hurricane Helen over the past week, and more than 200 people are confirmed dead. So talking about the long-term impacts of cyclones. So long-term, the first is economic loss, which may lead to families exhausting their financial resources, leaving less money which is available for future healthcare. The second being families dispersing, which weakens the social networks which are crucial to maintain one's health. And the third being government spending on healthcare, which could be diverted towards recovery. So these factors they particularly they impact infants, children, and young adults. And the researchers they found that it results in a quarter of all infant death in the US. So that was mostly what the article was talking about.
And also in the long term impacts, we can say that there is coastal erosion on a very large scale. And इसके साथ साथ salinization of the soil and also of the water, loss of mangroves, wetlands, and the forest that is present in that area. And also accompanied by the economic impacts, जिसमें agricultural losses and जो fisheries हैं उसमें भी decline देखने को मिलता है in the region. So that is also under the long term impacts caused by the cyclones.
And what are the factors which influences the formation of a hurricane? So one is warm ocean waters. Here the sea surface temperature of 27 degrees Celsius is a necessity for hurricane formation. Second is low wind shear. So wind shear refers to changes in the wind speed and direction at different altitudes. So for a hurricane formation, wind shear must be low and it should be between, we can say, 10 to 15 meters per hour. So high wind shear can disrupt the vertical developments of the storm. That is why low wind shear is supportive. Third is pre-existing weather disturbances. For example, it often begins as a tropical disturbance, which is again in a low pressure area, and it consists of clusters of thunderstorms within it. So these disturbances, they need a spin or a rotation, which is caused by Earth's rotation, which is again because of the Coriolis force. Then tropical waves or convergences of trade winds, that is also contributing. And when we individually solely talk about the Coriolis force, so it plays crucial role in causing rotation of the storm. So it is again in anti-clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. So moisture in the atmosphere, how it is an important basis. So humid atmosphere is essential for the formation of thunderstorms because it makes up the core of the hurricane. So moisture laden air, it rises, it cools and then condenses to form clouds. So it releases the latent heat which fuels the hurricane. and converging surface winds. So hurricane, it requires converging winds near the ocean's surface. So these winds, they come together and push up the moist air. So intertropical convergence zone, where these trade winds from the northern and southern hemisphere, they are meeting. And upper level high pressure is required for the outflow particularly, and it helps in creating an outflow of the air. So because of this outflow, it enables the hot air at the surface to rise up in a more efficient manner, and this maintains the energy of the storm. So distance from the equator. So in this case, for example, while warm water and low wind shear, they're essential, but hurricanes, they cannot form within about 5 degrees of the latitude from the equator due to the lack of sufficient Coriolis force to create the necessary spin. So because at equator, the Coriolis effect is it is we can say it is almost zero or negligible. And what are again the time of the year where we are seeing maximum amount of hurricane formation? So particularly in the Atlantic Ocean, it is between the month of August and October. So the peak season is this. And even El Nino and La Nina events, they also significantly impact the hurricane formation. So during, for example, if we take the instance of El Nino, so wind shear, it tends to increase in the Atlantic, suppressing the hurricane development. And in case of La Nina, the conditions lead to lower wind shear, so it supports the hurricane formation during La Nina.
The next article talks about India and the West Asian crisis. So India has high stakes in the West Asian region, and it's important that the conflict doesn't take a wider regional dimension. So this talks about Iran and Israel, which are on the brink of all-out war since for the second time since April. And so talking about India's own stake, so escalation of tension could impact India with regard to its people living in the region, economic interest, and strategic needs as well. So the West Asian region provides India with 80% of the oil supplies, and a wider war will almost inevitably raise the energy prices. So also major Arab countries which are keen to invest in the Indian economy, and those plans will likely be disrupted in the events of a wider conflict. Also, India has invested in its relationship with major Arab countries, Iran and Israel, and now new Delhi sees this extended neighborhood. So talking about West Asia, so we have Qatar, which is hugely influential, and it has been a consummate navigator of regional front lines. So it's engaged with all sides and it's given billions of dollars as aid to Palestine as well. Then we have Egypt, which shares borders with Israel and with both Gaza and Israel. And so the Sinai Peninsula to Israel in the 1967 war, but recovered in 1982 after the 1979 peace treaty. Then we have Saudi Arabia. So that Saudi Arabia views itself as the leader of the Islamic world under Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and it's been trying to advance connectivity initiatives in the region as well. So, however, Riyadh's relationship with Shia Iran's that has a complicated history. Then we have UAE, which is keen to see stability and peace in the region to build on its own prosperity to and future-proof itself. Then we have Turkey. So it's the key back channels between Tehran and Israel's western allies. Then US will being the traditional arbiter, so international military in the region. Then we have China positioning itself as Washington's influence and credibility wanes, so Beijing has tried to cast itself as a possible mediator and peacemaker. This is mostly
We can say with the West Asia, India is having economic ties because that region is rich in oil and gas resources. उसके अलावा there is also Indian diaspora that is present in the Gulf countries. So that is why we have also seen that in the West Asia, whenever a conflict happens, India tries to follow an approach of balancing between the powers, like seen in between the conflict of Saudi Arabia and Iran, and also recently in the conflict of Israel and Palestine. So, in that case, also, India focused on providing humanitarian support to the region. So, we can say that India is basically following a strategy of balancing between the powers in the region.
And one more impact that this again volatility can have is increase in the freight cost, because we are taking the longer trade routes via the Cape of Good Hope. So it has increased the freight cost by close to 15 to 20%. And when it comes to the import, so it can fuel up imported inflation because again of the spike in the prices of crude oil. So this can widen our current account deficit. So it can again, because this is current account deficit is one of the important macroeconomic fundamental. So it can impact again the pace of our economic growth as well.
why Chagos Islands matter and why UK keeps Diego Garcia after Mauritius deal. So the Chagos, it comprises 58 islands and lies roughly 500 kilometers to the south of the Maldives in the Indian Ocean, and they were uninhabited until the late 18th century, after which the French they bought the slave labor from Africa and India to work in this newly established coconut plantations. So after Mauritius gained independence in 1968, Chagos it remained with the Britain, and the UK government it gave the newly independent country a grant of £3 million over the detachment of the Chagos. So it is a strategic military base, and since it's located at a strategic location, and in 1966, Britain signed an agreement with the US, which made the BIOT available for the two countries' defense needs, and the land was acquired in 1967. So then BIOT administration it enacted immigration ordinance, which made it unlawful for a person to enter or remain in the Diego Garcia without a permit, and enabled the removal of those who remained on the island. So as the military begins, it became fully operational in 1986. And so talking about the ongoing tensions in the West Asia, so the presence in the Indian Ocean, it remains critical for the US interest right now. So Mauritius, it has a long claim with the UK illegally occupying Chagos and has raised the matter many times in the international fora. And in 2017, the UN General Assembly voted to ask the International Court of Justice to examine the legal status of the islands. So the agreement between UK and Mauritius, it strikes a balance, and the UK has ceded claim over the island, and Mauritius is now free to implement a program of free settlement on the islands other than the Diego Garcia. So India has maintained steadfast support to Mauritius' claim over the Chagos Islands since we were formerly colonized by the Britain. Over here, we can see the Chagos Islands location, located south of Maldives.
And we can also say, with the control over Diego Garcia, the Western powers such as UK and US are trying to counter the BRI of China, because China is also constructing military bases and ports such as in Djibouti. And also regarding the regional power dynamics, it can bring a change in the coming time. But for now, the American control and the British control are aligning with the goals of India regarding the Indo-Pacific region. So it can be in favor of India only.
And that is why India's stand has been that we support Mauritius' claims over the Chagos Islands. And apart from this, Chagos Islands, and then we have Agalaga Islands also. So this is also two island dependency of Mauritius and Western Indian Ocean. So for the overall objective of meeting free and open Indo-Pacific region, the again the we can say the democratic functioning or the control of Chagos Islands or be it Diego Garcia or the Agalaga Island is important. So that because as we are seeing China's strategy when it comes to expanding its bases in the Indian Ocean region, and these Chagos Islands or their governance should remain neutral. So even that's how it is important for India.
Indian push needed to end AIDS as global health threat by 2030. So this article talks about with India doing a large part of the heavy lifting, it is unlikely that the world will meet the SDG goal of ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. So we have demonstrated high commitment and positive results in the last decade, and the annual new HIV infection had fallen 44% between 2010 and 2023, which is better than the global average. So HIV prevention efforts, they need to be accelerated if India is to close the gap with the focus on specific states and districts. And the next 5 years would be critical for the country to accelerate efforts and share its experience with other countries in the region. So prevention is the key in HIV, and to achieve the goal of ending AIDS as a public threat, not only diagnose but also successively treating people with HIV would lower new infections. So we must ensure that there are sustainable health systems for HIV and health, which are co-designed and co-implemented by the communities and civil societies. So they respond to people's need, and the global AIDS strategy calls for 80% of prevention services to be delivered by a community-led organization. So India has made notable progress in reducing the AIDS-related deaths by nearly 80% in 2010 and 2023. And it is currently advocating for new technologies, including long-acting injections to reach all patients at affordable prices.
So when HIV remains untreated, it takes the form of AIDS, which is much more, we can say, threatening. So we have this red ribbon. This is the symbol for solidarity with the HIV positive people and those living with AIDS.
Farmers earn less than 40% of price paid for fruits and vegetables. So middlemen and retailers have seemed to have cornered large part of the price paid by the consumers. And farmers they're found to be have earned far lesser share of the consumer rupee in case of fruits, including bananas, grapes, and mangoes, and essential vegetables such as tomatoes, onions, and potatoes, while the share was much higher in dairy, poultry, and farming pulses. So Pulse inflation in India it finds at about 75% of the consumer rupee spent on gram came back to farmers, while the share was about 70% for moong and 65% for those the lentils, and 33% for tomatoes, 36% for onions, and 37% for potatoes, which is far lesser than the pulses.
So we can say that this gap which is there, it is being exploited by the middlemen. So that is why we talk about the importance of creation of more digital marketplaces where we do not have middlemen, and there is hassle-free manner when it comes to even farmers having the opportunity to sell their produce, having the diversity of selling their produce at different markets across India, and which fetches them better market determined prices.
The next article talks about e-Abkari portal. So this is an initiative after the Delhi liquor policy, and the excise department began piloting an e-Akbari portal, which would basically regulate and automate the alcohol businesses in the national capital. So it would have license renewal to placing orders for alcohol and getting import and transport permits, dispatching and sale of liquor in Delhi. So with this, the excise department will be able to regulate and track the entire trading process through the portal. And it's already running in other states. So the liquor vends, it runs in the four government corporations: the Delhi State Industrial Infrastructure Development Corporation, Delhi Tourism and Transportation Development Corporation, Delhi State Civil Corporation, and Delhi's Consumer Cooperative Wholesale Store. So we had ESCIMS portal, which was developed by TCS and was launched in 2012 and 13. So after the full-scale adoption of e-Abkari, that would be disbanded. Dengue prevention is simple. Alertness can save you and the family from dengue. So this article mainly talks about preventing mosquito breeding and how we can prevent dengue. So talks about water to stagnant in your homes and flower waste and anywhere in the surrounding, emptying the water coolers, and always covering the water tank and other utensils properly, not throwing the broken utensils, bottles, tires, and coconut shells or disposals in the open. So to prevent mosquito bites, wearing full sleeve clothes and using mosquito repellents.
So dengue is a viral infection, and when we talk about the rising risks, so according to WHO, half of the world's population is now at the risk of dengue.
Symptoms include high fevers, severe pain behind eyes, muscle, joint pain, rashes in the body, nausea, vomiting, stomachache.
So when it comes to vaccines, so if we covered that, one is the dengue vaccine. So we should include this in again the universal immunization program, which is there, so that it is again available at an affordable and competitive prices.
खादी के संग मनाए त्योहारों की खुशियां. This talks about the importance of khadi. Cities must focus on legacy fresh water. So this talks about how Chandigarh can solve its waste management issues. So Chandigarh was the first city which conceived post-independence as a benchmark for India's development when symbolizing the aspirations of a new developing nation. And the aim was to away from traditional town mechanism, creating sustainable, equitable society where the poorest had access to the same amenities as the rich. So the master plan, it emphasized creating self-sustaining sectors for water, power, open spaces, air, and solid waste management. So it talks about Swachh Bharat mission, which focused on two key aspects: scientific treatment of fresh water and remediation of existing dump sites. So scientific remediation involves expensive processes like excavation, converting waste into windows, and treating it with bioincolum. So the long-term vision is to move from mixed waste dumping to 100% scientific waste treatment. And according to the solid waste management rules 2016, compostable, recoverable, recyclable, reusable waste should not end up in landfills. So the ICC, it monitors vehicle movements for waste collections and education initiatives, which were initially integrated into the process, and grassroots efforts, self-help groups, and NGOs have been vital in educating and driving changes, especially in the villages. So initial segregation centers have been replaced by newer facilities, and with the smart city project, which has invested in upgrading STPs affecting the agriculture areas. So how we can learn from this and do the same management in other cities as well. Supreme Court lays down functionality essentially test to claim ITC. So procurement of goods or services must be directly essential to business corporation, and so cost of construction for consumers commercial structures intended for renting or leasing purposes. So functionality test, it will have to be applied to decide whether a building is a plant.
So if a plant is declared, it is recognized as a plant, you can claim the input tax credit. So this is for particularly like plant and machinery, which is considered to be the fixed capital. So you can claim your input tax credit.
Income tax should address alleged tax transgressions, not raise foreign bogies or have or behave like a corporate hired gun. So the income tax department cracked down 5 NGOs and has shown the intimation letters which were issued to the NGOs. So they're loose and voluminous, and they string far beyond the IT department remit. So they seek to weaponize the rulebook fine print against a targeted NGO, and they indulge in freestyle spectre paintings and broad brush conspiracy mongering. So references to foreign funding, which is alleged that it was being misused for the very least activities to the contrary to the objectives for which they were originally formed for. And this sparked by the IT department's bid to squeeze the living spaces of the Avengers by survey summons, and bulky notices. So the country's coal mines and thermal plant projects that the IT department seems to be so protective about will go on. So it mostly talks about the NGOs and how the funds or the funds which were originally collected for something else are being misused, and how the income tax department can take steps against it. On SIPCOT and Tamil Nadu industries. So the State Industries Promotion Corporation of Tamil Nadu Limited was established on March 25, 1971, and the objective was to plan, develop, operate, and promote industrial growth in Tamil Nadu, which was started with the vision to promote medium and large scale industries in the state. And in the initial years, there were two industrial parks which were established, Ranipet and Hosur. So the former, it focused on leather, chemicals, and pharma industries, while Hosur focused on automobiles and general engineering sectors. So currently, Tamil Nadu has 50 SIPCOT industrial parks, and 17 more parks are coming up in the next 1 year. So right now, it is focusing on promoting sector-specific industrial parks, such as the International Furniture Park at Thoothukudi, a medical device park at the Orgadu, and electronic manufacturing clusters at Mangalore and Pilaipakam, mega food parks, and future mobility and these vehicle parks. So supported messages to evaluate over 1,000 innovative ideas, 200 prototypes, and promote 30 startups graduation till the seed investment stage. So other states can follow a similar medium for development. What is the status of Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0? So Swachh Bharat Mission is basically a countrywide campaign which was launched by the central government on 2nd October 2014. And the objective was to eliminate open defecation and to create open defecation free villages. So in 2021, the second edition to the 5 year Swachh Bharat Mission Urban 2.0 was committed to making all cities garbage free cities by 2026. So this talks about legacy waste dump sites. They're dump sites that contain solid waste and they've been collected and stored for years in unscientific and uncontrolled manners. And these dump sites, they were originally developed on the outskirts